Rev up your engines! Made in China. Today I'm going to talk about a problem I see all too often these days. Counterfeit or cheap knockoff car parts. Now here's the part a customer got. It was a mass airflow sensor, and you can see it was made in China. Now unfortunately, the vehicle that went on was made in Japan. And the original mass airflow sensor was made in Japan. Chinese made one was less than $100, and the original equipment factory one was $350. The customer decided to try the Chinese one. And guess what? It bit him and me in the rear end, because when I put it in, it actually ran worse than it did with the old one. I put the old one back in, drove it around, looked at the data, then I put the new one in. The new one actually had worse data than the old one that had been worn out. And when it comes to fixing cars, nothing, and I mean nothing, is worse than you find what the problem is, you replace the part, it doesn't fix the problem, so you think, gee, it must have been something else. Only to find out later, if you ever do find out, that yes, the original part was bad, but the cheap knockoff replacement part wasn't any good either. And unfortunately, even I've gotten stung by this. Check out my wife's Lexus. The headlights were all fogged up, so I thought, oh, I'll get a cool, more modern style set to put on. Well, I did, and look what happened a year and a half later. The new one started to crack. Look at that. I gotta polish them up. They're all cracked because they were poorly made in China. Guess what? Just like these cool looking lenses I put on her Matrix, check it out. Inside, the plastic's all bubbling up. I mean, just poor quality. And unfortunately, I see this more and more every day. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is cheap knockoff oil filters. In this case, it's an STP, but you look closely, it's made in China. Now, good oil filters don't cost that much, maybe $8 or $10 if you buy the highest quality one. Don't go out and buy these $1.99, $2 ones. You get a chance with your engine to save $5, $6. That's just stupid. Now, there's tons of good oil filters out there. I got a whole video on it. There's really only a few manufacturers of oil filters. Like you take the Pennzoil Platinum oil filters. Pennzoil's an oil company. They don't make oil filters. I believe Fram makes those, but it's their high-end ones that do have silicone gaskets, better valves, anti-drain back valves inside. They're perfectly fine. So you buy one of those for $8 or $10 or something, or buy them in volume on Amazon or eBay and get them cheaper. As long as they're the actual ones and don't say made in China, those are great oil filters. But please don't buy the cheapest ones you can get your hands on, 99 cents, $1.99. They don't filter as well. And especially these days, people put more and more mileage before they change it. The filter's got to filter it. Even some of the cheap ones will say, oh, good to up to 3,000 miles, where the more expensive ones will say 10,000 miles or 15,000 miles. They last longer. They filter better. For a few bucks, if you're not changing your oil every 3, but changing it every 8 or 10, get the more expensive filter. It's worth it. As you can see from the inside of this quality filter, it's got silicone. It has a metal relief valve, not a plastic one. And it's got many more pleats made of synthetic material that actually filter better. Now, the next knockoff thing I'm going to talk about is air filters. You don't want to buy the cheapest air filter either, because they just don't filter as well. We'll count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Original one, you can tell it's bigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. It's also wider, bigger surface area. It's going to filter better. Plus the OEM filters, they're often a better material. If you look, they're often thicker. They got a lot more filtration ability. And here's something a lot of people don't think about. The air filter is before the mass airflow sensor. If you have a cheap aftermarket filter, the little fibers can break off. They get sucked through the mass airflow sensor. The mass airflow sensors are often hot wire sensors, and what that means is that when you shut the car off or when you start it up, the mass airflow sensor hot wire gets hot and it burns impurities off. If little fibers from a cheap air filter get on there, it can burn out your mass airflow sensors. Some of those things can cost $300, $400, $500. Do you really want to gamble that? To save a couple bucks on an air filter. And for your safety, don't get cheap knockoff tires, especially cheap Chinese made ones. Check these out. Let's say here, we'll turn the camera upside down and we look closely it says, made in USA. Now these particular tires have been on there for like 12 years. And they're starting to get a little dry rot, so I need to change them soon. But they've never had a flat. They still got a ton of tread left on them. Before that, this car had Chinese tires on it when I bought it. And they were so poorly made that they kept losing air, which is why I bought new ones. And here's the weird thing. They were just losing air through osmosis. I take them off. I put them in the bathtub, fill it up with water. No bubbling, so it didn't show any leaks, but they kept losing pressure. They were just losing it through the casing of the tire. It was so poorly manufactured that the air just over time was leaking out. Now it didn't in the bathtub because it was just sitting there. I'm assuming that when you drove down a highway at highway speeds and the tire got hotter, then the air started to leak out more. But regardless, the Chinese made ones leaked air. These babies haven't leaked air in 12 years, so don't buy cheap knockoff tires. And if you don't like noise, don't buy cheap brake pads. I don't know how many hundreds of times that people got me a car. They said, Scotty, we put brakes on it, but it's squeaking like mad. What's wrong? And I take them off and I look and I said, you got these cheap brake pads. They're just made too cheap and they make a lot of noise. I just tell them, if you don't like noise, buy these Akabono pads. I bought Akabono pads. It's a Japanese company. They make excellent brake pads. And yeah, they cost more. But so what if you spend $20 or $30 more on a set of brake pads? It's going to last you. Today, you might get 70, 80,000 miles or more out of a set of brake pads. What do you care if it's 20 or 30 bucks extra for peace of mind, for a quality product? It will make hardly any noise at all. And really, brakes are a safety item. They turn all the kinetic energy of your car, when you're going 60 miles an hour and slam on the brakes, into heat energy. They have to dissipate that heat. You don't want to go cheap on brake pads. I had a customer, he wanted to save money on parts for his cars. So he went to one of these online buyers and he was buying some brake calipers that were Delco. Now, if you know anything about Delco, the name is spelled D-E-L-C-O. Now, the calipers he brought me to put on his vehicle, they said Delco too, but they came in an unmarked box, and when I pulled the calipers out, cast in them was Delco, D-E-L-K-O. It was cast in the steel, but it was spelled wrong. So that particular one was a dead giveaway. They spelled Delco wrong. And like I say, it was an unmarked box. Technically here in the United States, the boxes are all supposed to say where the product comes from. Now, even in the case of this bad mass airflow sensor, at least it says made in China. You know where it's coming from. I don't particularly advise buying these Chinese-made ones for air sensors, but at least it told you where it was from. Always check the box. It says made in China, and it's an electronic part. I would be extremely leery about putting it on my car, especially something like a mass airflow sensor. That measures how much air goes into the engine in grams per second, tells the computer how much fuel to push in the engine through the fuel injectors by how many milliseconds it sprays. It's very complex stuff, and often the knockoff parts just will not perform correctly right out of the box, or they break within a few months. I've seen that happen too. Now, purely mechanical, simple parts, it can be okay. Like this. Here's a dog bone mount. It's a motor mount. It was made in Thailand. They do good work in Thailand. This thing's been on here for a long time. It's held up quite well. No problems. It's actually lasting better than the original one. My English motorcycle Triumph here, it was made in Thailand. It's the best Triumph I ever had. From what I've seen, a factory job in Thailand is a good job. I got friends from Thailand. They said as soon as you got a job there, getting paid, that's a good job. They can support a whole bunch of their family off of that. They make Ducati motorcycles in Thailand. They make all kinds of stuff in Thailand. There's nothing wrong with their stuff. It's like a motor mount. It's steel and rubber. It's not rocket science making those things. Like I said, electronic stuff, not so much. You don't want to get some cheap aftermarket one. Delco used to make pretty good batteries in the United States. Ages ago, most of their production from what I see comes from South Korea. I've seen a lot of Delco batteries, they say made in South Korea. And guess what? They seem to be some of the worst batteries I've ever seen. Years ago, a chain here that was called Charlie's Hilo, they used to sell them. They sold them pretty cheap for like 29 bucks a piece. I bought scores of them. Within a year or two, every single one of them came back because it was bad. And here's the reason behind that. When I was a young mechanic, we had batteries at the gas station. They were sealed, vacuum sealed. There was no acid in them. Customer wanted a battery, We'd pop the seals, we'd pour battery acid and charge it on a charging machine for about an hour. So theoretically, these batteries could last forever because they were vacuum sealed. There was nothing going on. Once you put the acid in, they start to deteriorate. Well, these Delco batteries made in South Korea, they are made with acid in, then they ship them over here. They're sealed batteries. You can't add anything anyways, even if you wanted to. As they're coming by ship or wherever they make it over here, they're degrading over time. By the time people get them here and start using them, lead acid batteries, their lifespan starts to deteriorate as soon as you put the acid in. I've had customers buy those, they'll get a year and then they go bad. They just deteriorated that badly. What you want from a battery is the freshest battery you can, like eggs. You want one that is, if all possible, less than a month old. That's why you go someplace where they sell a lot of batteries. I personally go to an AutoZone that's 2 blocks down the street because one is 2 blocks down the street and they sell a ton of batteries. So they have a big turnover of batteries. They're always getting fresh ones in. And even that, I look at the little date sticker. They all have date stickers, and if you don't comprehend it, have them explain. They can tell you how old that battery is. My advice, if it's more than a month old, don't buy it. Get one that's less than a month old. Certainly one that's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months old, because it's been sitting on a shelf deteriorating. They're not made to sit being full of acid. To my knowledge, the only place left where you can get a vacuum sealed battery is a Mercedes-Benz dealer for the big giant Mercedes. Last time I bought one, they had them. And popped it, put the acid and charged it, and away you went. Because the lifespan of that is pretty much indefinite because there's no acid in it yet. So it can sit there for years. Not so once they put the acid in. Now if you do work on your car, take heed of this. It's a cheaply made set of channel lock players made in China. It's so cheap that it doesn't even tell you that it's made in China. I know it is because it said so on the box. But the tool itself doesn't say anything. It doesn't tell you where it's made. When they don't tell you where they're made in some cheap place. That's just the way it goes these days. So now you know a little bit more about cheap or knockoff auto parts or tools and how you can discern the good from the bad from the really ugly. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.